And we actually followed your advice, because the one thing you told us to do is to, the one thing we can do about ticks is prevention in terms of self-protection.
Absolutely.
So we actually, the town invested in the 2 products that I brought here today. And, you know, I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of questions, and we really look forward to just an update on ticks.
Well, that's a good start, because I got another idea for a town investment that we can get to. All right, we ready to go? How many were here last time and seen this material before? Oh, a few of you. Okay. All right, very good. So there'll be a review, because some things are worth repeating, which means nagging, okay? Some people don't get it on the first take. But there's some new information that I'm going to talk about, because if you've watched the news lately, we have another disease that's entered the deer tick picture. And I want to kind of brief you on what we have found and what some of the implications are for this thing. I've been here now 5 years, okay, so not a long time in terms of careers. Prior to this, I spent 24 years with Ocean Spray Cranberries. So when I came here, I was put on a pretty much vertical learning curve. I knew nothing about ticks. And so what I tried to do was just read everything I could get my paws on, talked with tons of people to figure out, all right, what's going on with this situation and how am I going to have an impact? And I've shared this before with people, and I'm going to share with you my very first learning, cooperative extension, in the world of ticks. They have no friends, absolutely no friends. Everybody I've talked to hates these things with such a bloody passion. Mosquitoes, people can kind of half accept. They're part of the food chain, the ecosystem, and all that stuff. But not so with ticks. And when I mean everybody, I mean everybody. So when a gentle soul like the Dalai Lama turns his back on a form of life on this planet, that's a pretty good summary statement, okay? The Dalai, he's a savvy guy. He tweeted this out a couple of years ago. I picked up on it and incorporated it into my deck. But I also stay in touch with this guy. He's pretty interesting. And he has modified his position on this somewhat. Who knew the Dalai was such a hardcore New England Patriots fan? Okay? I love the guy. All right, where are we kind of on the map with respect to Lyme disease? I looked at the CDC data on state rankings. Well, Massachusetts is number 3rd. We're like a decimal point ahead of Rhode Island, all right? So Maine, number 1, Vermont. So all the New England states occupy the top 7 spots for incidence rate of Lyme disease. So if you ever wondered if you were really existing at ground zero, good morning, welcome.
Thank you.
Like your hat. Good eye.
Pump house.
Okay. So we stand out in the Northeast by a big margin. Lyme, 95% of all cases of Lyme disease in the United States reside in 14 different states. So in those 14 states, it's pretty heavy-duty stuff. Here on the Cape, though, this is kind of interesting and a little bit baffling to me. If you look at incidence rate by town, Truro, Wellfleet, Brewster, Orleans, and Chatham, basically most of the lower Cape are in the top 5 tier, with the exception of P-Town, which actually doesn't surprise me. I think it's either there's not much tick habitat in P-Town, or they just want to stand out as being different. I don't know, haven't figured that one out. But Eastham is somewhere kind of down in the middle part of this, so a little bit of departure from what I see here. Now these are flawed numbers, I'll tell you up front. These are guesstimates, all right? Because while it's a reportable disease, doctors might just look at you and see a bullseye rash, give you your script, and not bother doing the paperwork. So the underreporting of this is tremendous. But a problem. So you kind of stand out at the lower end of what I typically see out here, and I'm not exactly sure why. I think that's good news, so.
Yeah, if you live in Eastham.
If you live in Eastham. All right, let's talk about the different players that we now have in the world of ticks on the Cape. Here's the dog tick. And for a number of us, this is a tick I remember growing up with in Worcester. I mean, that was the only tick around. The way I spent my childhood, if there were deer ticks in Lyme in Worcester, I would have had Lyme disease about 50 times, and we'd be having this discussion through a Ouija board, okay? Well, I consider this more of an annoyance than a public health threat, even though this tick can vector the pathogens that cause Rocky Mountain spotted fever and tularemia, both of which can be very serious. But those two diseases this far north, particularly Rocky Mountain, are pretty rare. All right, here's the newest player on the map, Lone Star tick. You guys may have heard about some of this in the news. We've been tracking this thing for some time. Lone Star tick has actually been moving north for the past 40 years. And up till recently, the northernmost points of established populations were really on Cuttyhunk and Noshaw Islands off the west coast of the Vineyard. But about 3 years ago, with the help of Cape Cod mosquito control, we found this in Sandy Neck Beach Park. That's about a 6-mile long peninsula, and we found Lone Star tick from one end to the other. That puppy owns that piece of real estate right now. So they've got a foothold, and we're now getting reports from other places. Falmouth, Cape Cod Mosquito Control has been picking it up in Harwich and Brewster area. So this tick is here to stay. So in Sandy Neck, we've basically found the first established population of Lone Star on the Massachusetts mainland. Now, Lone Star tick is very different than a deer tick, okay? Lone Star ticks, they're called an aggressive biter, meaning Lone Star ticks, unlike deer ticks that are blind, Lone Star ticks have great vision, and they can run. They can run with spider-like speed. They see you, they will hunt you down like a coyote on a buddy, guaranteed. I've seen it, and they are fast. The other thing about this aggressive behavior is that the female ticks lay their eggs in a cluster, like all ticks do, and these eggs hatch out in the late summer, August into September, and so you end up at that time of the year with very high concentrations of ticks in a small area. So if you're coming along, you bump into one, generally you meet the whole family. And the way Lone Star ticks work, that's what we see. They will swarm you, and within minutes you can have 200 or 300 bites. Now, this has already been misdiagnosed in a couple of ERs on the Cape. People have gone in with this condition, and doctors are passing this off as chigger bites. And there's a couple problems with this. The first one being, we don't have chiggers this far north. Okay, so I've got to communicate this point to the medical community sometime in August, just so if people are coming in, they can look at something else. And the other thing is, chiggers don't typically bite your feet and ankles. They basically more bite you around your waistband area. While these guys don't vector the pathogens that cause Lyme disease, they've got their own associated set of diseases, ehrlichiosis, that can be pretty serious. Starry, which is a type of rash disease with flu-like symptoms. We did find a tick sample in Falmouth that actually was positive for this thing, and tularemia. But the real striking difference about this tick versus all other ticks, the bite of a Lone Star tick can trigger an allergy to red meat, okay? And this allergic response can be as mild as hives all the way to anaphylactic shock, okay? And it's not just beef, but it's pork, lamb, and even beef byproducts like gelatin. I was reading some research a couple months ago where you can add gray squirrel to that list, just so you know. All right, that research was done down in Virginia. Go figure, they'll eat anything down there. All right, so this is kind of a game changer. This thing is going to spread and become part of our landscape. All right, but the front player in this is still the deer tick, and the proper name for this is black-legged tick. Name deer tick is a misnomer. This thing has been documented to feed on 125 different vertebrate hosts. So deer are part of this, but there's a whole bunch of parts that are involved. All right, one of the questions I get every spring is, Larry, we had a brutal winter. What did it do to the tick populations? Because when you get a hard frost, mosquito season is done. And a lot of people kind of project that thinking onto ticks. The cold weather must have done something. All the Cape newspapers call me every spring and ask me this question. I say, well, it's the same answer as last year. It did nothing, all right? And as a matter of comparison, your winters here on the Cape aren't that harsh, okay? Your little climate change and a few more degree days, you'll be growing bananas here, especially out here on the lower Cape, believe me. But when I was with Ocean Spray, I spent 24 years traveling to Wisconsin, where I went by the name Misha, okay? And Wisconsin, they do have real winters. 25 below zero for extended periods of time is not unusual. In Wisconsin, deer ticks are just happy, 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 and Wisconsin is quite endemic for Lyme disease. And the reason for this is that these ticks actually synthesize the chemical glycerol. These things make antifreeze. And what they also found out is that Lyme disease bacteria called the spirochete, it feeds on the glycerol in the tick to keep itself going. So this is a nice engineered little package, okay? Right. Unlike Lone Star ticks, deer ticks wait for dinner to come to them. So they might be on top of a piece of vegetation with their legs up in the air like they're signaling a Patriots touchdown, okay? That's called questing behavior. And they have this beautiful little claw at the end of their legs. So all you have to do is just gently brush up against the tick and it'll attach and then start seeking a place to have some dinner. One of the things we try and communicate to people is how big these ticks are. You know, if you're doing a tick check at the end of the day, what kind of are you looking for? And the best thing we came up with is this bagel topping analogy. An adult tick is the size of a sesame seed. These nymph stage ticks that are out during the summer, they're responsible for most of the disease. They're about the size of a poppy seed. And I think I have.
Could I ask you a question about the Lone Star tick?
Yeah, I'm going to pass these around. These are, so it's one thing to talk about a poppy seed, but these are actual nymph stage ticks. Yes, questions, sir?
Right here. I noticed all the bites on the leg that you showed. Now, do those ticks latch on and suck blood, or do they just bite through?
No, they get a blood meal.
So that person had to pick all those ticks off their leg, you think?
The best way to deal with larval ticks, duct tape. Works like a charm. Duct tape, they are gone. Well,
Waxing it.
yeah, little waxing now and then doesn't hurt.
They embed themselves like a regular tick?
But,
They embed themselves like a regular tick?
well, they don't embed. They have a long beak that they plunge into you that has barbs. That's why it's hard to get them out. So when people call me about, you know, Larry, the head is just totally embedded, but I can't get their head in you. It's just, but they got a long beak, okay? So that's what does it. So those larval ticks will take a blood meal because the larvae need a blood meal in order to become a nymph stage tick. So the ticks have 3 different blood meals in their whole life cycle. So they feed as a little larva, they feed as a nymph, and they feed as an adult. Okay.
So does that barb that doesn't come out, it goes in?
If you break it off and it stays in, some people will go to the ER and demand surgery. At that point, once it's detached from the tick's head, the bacteria are up in the tick's salivary glands in the head. Once that beak is broken away, it's basically like pipe, okay? So it's not going to cause infection. It's no worse than getting the wood splinted. So you can use fine tip tweezers and get it out, or just slap it with a neosporin and it'll dissolve. All right. And this nymph stage tick, the importance, we see this this shows a couple things. One of the questions I get all the time is, Larry, when's tick season? I say, well, God, smart ass. It starts in January, ends in December, starts up again in January. So the risk of getting a tick bite is basically year round. You get temperatures above freezing and a break in snow cover, ticks will be active. But that nymph stage tick that's the size of that poppy seed thing I'm sending around, responsible for 85% of all tick-borne diseases. So that particular stage is really the one we need to prevent ourselves the most from getting bitten by. And those things are tiny. That's the biggest problem with this. The other thing is not everybody's affected equally. This shows Lyme disease by age group. So on the far left, those are kids under age 5. Kids age 5 to 9 are the highest incidence rate of Lyme disease in the state. So I try and do my best to talk to soccer moms and soccer dads a lot, because whatever we've been doing up to this point in time is not working. We need to do a better job. Then the incidence rate goes down for people in their 20 and 30 somethings, and then you see this ramp up for people in their late 40s, 50s, and 60s. So we have this kind of bimodal distribution of infection. Based on the data collected at UMass, it looks like these are the two groups that are getting most of the tick bites. You have
In
questions?
terms of your outreach and education regarding young children, what is the acceptance of parents to use repellents, and do you see a change in attitude about the use of repellents and preventative?
That's probably the most difficult discussion I have, and we'll get to that because there are some points I make with parents. I'm point blank, very blunt on this subject, and we'll get to that. But yeah, those are tough conversations. All right, the other diseases that these deer ticks can give you, one is babesiosis, and this is kind of like getting malaria. It's a parasite that invades your red blood cells, and so unlike Lyme, this thing can be directly fatal. Okay, it's a serious thing. I've talked to a number of people that have recovered from this. And the other thing they've discovered is that, well, like malaria, you go through cycles of fever and chills and severe anemia. Typically, your plate counts drop like a rock off a cliff. The other thing that they discovered a couple of years ago, you can get babesiosis from blood transfusion. So the Red Cross is scrambling to try and figure out a way to screen the quality of the blood supply. Right now, they do it basically through a questionnaire. You go in to donate blood, there'll be a question, have you ever had babesiosis? If you check the yes box, you do get your cranberry oatmeal cookie and your apple juice and send you on your way. You can't donate blood ever again. And the other one is anaplasmosis, and this is a disease that invades one type of your white blood cells. And here's the big problem, the symptoms, fever, chills, or nausea, headache, abdominal pain, confusion. A lot of those look exactly like Lyme disease to a doctor. And so if you're working with a physician that's suspecting a tick-borne disease and you're not flipping a positive test for Lyme, because some doctors won't treat you unless you flip that positive test, all right? And that test is really unreliable. You might just have something else going on. For these two diseases, southeastern Massachusetts is really the hotbed for these two, although anaplasmosis, for some reason, southern Berkshire County, they are off the charts. They are just screaming for help. And I've gotten calls from their county health nurse, looking for help. And Berkshire County is a little bit of a haul for us. Plus, I work for Barnstable County. Now, the age effect is very different here. These diseases are rarely found in younger people. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It's just very uncommon. But you get to be 60 plus, that's where 95% of all of these cases occur, okay? So when I take this show to council on aging centers, believe me, everybody in the room, I have their undivided attention on this one. All right, and now we have a fourth disease, Borrelia miyamotoi, okay? And it's related to Lyme. Lyme is Borrelia burgdorferi, so they're kind of a brother-sister sort of thing. So they look like this fusilli-shaped pasta. And the organism has been known about for about 10 or 12 years, but there was a linkage made between this bug and human disease only fairly recently. And once they announced those findings, they started finding cases in the United States. I think the first one was on Nantucket. They're now calling it relapsing fever. And when we looked at the tick populations on the Cape, we found this in about 3% of the ticks that we collected on the Cape. So it's out there at fairly low levels, but it's probably going to follow the same pattern as Lyme. Lyme, we typically find infection rates for the nymphs 20-25%, for the adult stage ticks 50%. Better odds than the state lottery, okay? All right, the latest one, Powassan, okay? This is a disease that was described in Powassan, Ontario back in 1958. And Powassan is just north of Wisconsin and Minnesota. So for a number of years, most of the cases that were found were out there in the upper central Midwest. But about 10 or 12 years ago, it started showing up on the East Coast, mostly eastern New York in the Hudson Valley area. And so we've been watching, their number of cases ramp up. It's pretty rare, so the number of cases is low overall, but it's out there. And so we were wondering, when is this going to happen in Massachusetts? Well, it did. I learned through a workers' comp attorney that we actually had Powassan cases in the state and in Barnstable County. So I called DPH and they finally gave me some data on this. In the last 2 years, there have been 9 cases of this, and it has been found in 4 different counties. One of the things they wanted to find out before giving me information was, were the people bitten by ticks in the state of Massachusetts, that they didn't go to New York, get bitten, come back home and get sick. So they now have confirmed this. The typical symptoms of this are encephalitis. So if you come down with this as a neuroinvasive pathogen, it'll land you in the hospital, okay? In these 9 cases, there have been no fatalities, but statistically, on average, about 10% of the people that get Powassan die, unfortunately. And those that survive generally have permanent neurological damage. So it's rare, and we're finding, though, that, in fact, I don't know if I have a slide on this. No. We conducted a research project, surveillance project this spring in collaboration with Steve Rich at UMass Amherst. He's director of the Laboratory of Medical Zoology. And we had ticks collected from Falmouth at 6 different sites, Falmouth all the way to Truro. And when I got the data in June, we found that we had detects of Powassan in 4 out of our 6 sites, okay? And the ticks we found tested in Truro, the infection rate was about 10.5%. So there's ticks walking around with a lot of this stuff. But this is kind of like getting West Nile, okay? You can be bitten by a mosquito exposed to West Nile and not show any symptoms. And it looks like it's the same deal with Powassan. You can have a lot of exposure, and there's data on this out of New York to support this. So they show a lot of people get exposed to this, but they never get sick. In those rare instances where people do get sick, it's pretty serious, okay? So it will land you in the hospital. In fact, one of the cases I'm familiar with, there was a guy who was hospitalized for 6 months with this thing. Yes, sir?
Is that covered by the deer tick also?
Yes. Yep. So now we're up to 5 different diseases that potentially that are associated with this thing. And so we're still learning about this. We presented these data to your commissioners last week, and then your assembly of delegates, and then we've had a lot of media coverage, a lot of TV and radio and newspapers. So the awareness is gotten out there very, very quickly. So we actually are in the process of writing a grant proposal to Cape Cod Healthcare. They have a community benefits grant program, and we've received funding for 3 straight years on different projects. So they really like the work we're doing. So Steve and I, starting tomorrow, we're going to flesh out a grant proposal. We want to expand surveillance to every single town on the Cape. We want to get a detailed map of where is this thing and at what levels, kind of get some baseline data, and hopefully continue that going forward like we've done with other deer tick diseases.
Sorry.
Oh, am I close enough? Okay, because I can yell. I'm a parent. All right, so let's talk about protection measures, and we're going to focus here this morning on protect yourself. So we have a 3-point mantra that we talk to: protect yourself, protect your yard, and protect your pets. We don't have time today to go into all the details on the other things, but I'm certainly available to talk about them. One of the things I recommend to people is wear light colors, okay? Makes it easier to see the ticks. And there's a lot of extension recommendations when you come in from an outdoor activity. Put your clothes in the washer, then put them in the dryer on high heat for an hour. And what has been found out is that ticks can actually go through a wash cycle and live, okay? So best thing to do is throw your clothes in the dryer for 20 minutes, up the heat, drop the humidity. Ticks aren't that tough. In 20 minutes, in fact, there's a high school girl in Braintree who took this on as a project because she was reading this dry clothes for 1 hour on high heat. She said, it's just gonna ruin my clothes, excuse me. As you can tell, I've been doing a lot of talking lately. She just thought that was outrageous recommendation. So she did her own experiments, and she found out it took as little as 5 minutes in the dryer to kill the tick. So that's how good science gets done. You know, you challenge dogma and you design an experiment and go forward. All right. Let's talk about repellents for a little bit. I spent a lot of time on this subject with people. Repellents come in a couple different flavors. You have these products on top that contain the active ingredients DEET, picaridin, because now there are a number of DEET alternatives, IR3535, oil of lemon eucalyptus. Those are for treating exposed skin. DEET on clothing doesn't really work that well. In fact, DEET on clothing can actually basically dissolve certain fabrics, certain synthetic fabrics. The other thing I talk a lot about with the soccer moms, and I think this is what you're getting at, Jane, these all natural products, okay? Things like the clove oil, the eucalyptus and whatnot. There's a huge difference between these two categories of repellents, okay? These products are EPA registered, okay? Meaning that if they have a claim on the label that it will repel ticks and mosquitoes for 6 hours, 8 hours, there are data on file to support that claim. These all natural products, there's a list of exempt ingredients from EPA. If you use the product on, an active on that list into a product, you don't have to register it with EPA, meaning you don't have to supply any data that it works at all, okay? So it's all anecdotal. So the conversation I have with parents on this, that they think they're doing the right thing for their kids, I'm using an all-natural, that just appeals to everybody, the all-natural sales pitch. And I tell people that if you're using these products on your kids or yourself, you're dodging bullets, okay? Remember that slide, kids age 5 to 9? We got to do something better than we have been doing. So I wish these products would go away, because I think they lead people into a false sense of security, flat out. And so I steer people away from these products as hard as I can. Are there any questions on these for exposed skin? Okay. All right, the other repellent, and I'm glad you guys have this available now. I've been preaching this now for 5 years since I discovered how well this works, the active ingredient permethrin. So this is not for treating skins, for treating fabric, so your pants, your socks, and we'll talk about footwear in a second. This thing, once you put it on your clothing, it'll keep its activity through 6 washings, okay? I actually kind of retreat after 4 washings because I don't like to take chances. And there's a number of different brands on this product. So you guys have bought Repel, but there's Coleman that you can get. I think the Agways have that. Sawyer, which I know EMS is converted to. And the good thing is that I've convinced all the major garden centers on the Cape to carry this product, because not only does it repel ticks, but it will kill ticks, okay? What I found when I was doing research on this product is that if you put a tick on a permethrin-treated fabric surface for 60 seconds and then put that tick on a clean surface, on average that tick is dead in 9 minutes. This is the most effective tool in the box. I wear this year-round, and since I've been doing this, I've not got a single tick bite. And the word's getting out. Some of the garden centers are telling me they can't keep product on shelf, which is very, very good news, okay? The importance of treating footwear, I can't overstate that at all. Those nymph stage ticks that are the size of a poppy seed that cause most of our diseases, they're down in the leaf litter, okay? They're not up on vegetation like the adult ticks that might be a couple feet off the ground. They're in the leaf litter. So those nymph stage ticks, the first place they attach to is your footwear, okay? So I treat my footwear about every 3 or 4 weeks, all right? The other trick that I do with treating pants in particular is, Jane was wondering if I was going to demonstrate this, and these products, you're not supposed to use them indoors, okay? So So I said, we'll just talk through it. But take your clothes outside, put them over, a porch rail, shoes on a deck, spray them till they're, damp, visibly, damp. Let them dry off and you're good to go. The other thing I do with my pants is that when they're dry on the outside, and I treat from about here down, I'll turn them inside out. I'll treat the inside from about here down as well, in case ticks from underneath, okay? You gotta think like a tick in this business, all right? Any questions on this? This is, I can't push this product enough. And we'll get to your question on toxicity, because that's an important one. All right? The other way you can do this, you can buy pre-treated clothing from a company, Insect Shield, and this keeps its activity through 70 washings, basically the life of the garment, all right? There's a number of companies that make insect repellent clothing, under these brands, Orvis, Bean. EMS is now carrying ex officio clothing. Well, Insect Shield's in the private label business, so if you bought it from Bean, it came from Insect Shield, okay? Very, very effective. That's what I'm wearing today. These are Insect Shield pants, very fashionable and deadly to ticks, all right? When I first got these, what I did was, pardon?
What do those cost?
They're line priced with other, khakis, so about $50. Yeah, so when I got them in the mail, I was pretty excited, so I put them on, and the first thing I did was I went charging right into the bushes. And this is the fall, I know the adult ticks are out there in force. And so I'm walking through, I'm almost laughing because I think I know what's going to happen. And I'm seeing ticks attached to my legs, and they start crawling up. And after about 30 or 40 seconds, they stopped crawling. And you could see them lifting their legs alternately, like, I don't like this. And after about another 30 or 40 seconds, they started falling off. It was like a tick water slide, all right? So very, very effective. The other way you can skin this cat is you can send your clothes to Insect Shield, and for a modest fee, about $10 a garment, they will treat it with their process and send it back to you with the 70 washings claim, okay? Good company. Their company president has been in contact with me a number of times. We kind of correspond now because I'm giving them product development ideas. So they ever think about doing footwear, which they said they can't do. Well, it can be done. I used to work in a shoe factory when I was in college. We can do this. Might start my own company. This is the elephant in the room slide I think Jane was alluding to. What about permethrin toxicity? The soccer moms and soccer dads look at me like I'm absolutely crazy. Okay, I'll give them a little bit on that. They're saying, Larry, you want me to put my kids in clothing treated with a synthetic chemical pesticide. And I nod my head on this one. I do not give ground on this because I keep thinking about the age groups, kids age 5 to 9. Let's do something. So I spend a lot of time with parents walking through because I do get a lot of pushback on this. So we talk about toxic profile of permethrin. It's over 2,000 times more toxic to a tick than a person. Ticks are little, people are big. Doesn't take a lot. Those formulations are only 0.5%. EPA did establish a position on this. Reasonable certainty, because you can't be totally certain, but permethrin-treated clothing poses no harm to infants, children, pregnant women, or nursing mothers. And their criteria would be fairly conservative. And this is because permethrin has very low skin absorption, unlike some other pesticides like diazinon. You put it on your skin, it mainlines into your bloodstream. Not so with pyrethroids like permethrin or bifenthrin or some of the other thrins. And whatever's absorbed is metabolized very quickly. National Academy of Sciences, they were wondering about the long-term exposure effects. And what they did was evaluate what about exposure to permethrin where if people were wearing, permethrin treated everything basically, 18 hours a day, every single day for 10 years. And when they rolled up that aggregate exposure, they saw no reason to expect an adverse effect, all right? And the other thing I point out to people and parents, permethrin's the active ingredient that you would slather on an infant for scabies mite, and it's also the active ingredient to treat kids for head loss. So when I look at permethrin toxicity and I look at the risk, which I think is incredibly low, and I weigh that against the consequences of one of these tick-borne diseases, for me, that is easy math, and that is how I make the sale. I've gotten parents actually to go out and do this, which is, it's hard work, but I'm persistent. So any other questions on permethrin toxicity while we're here? All right, I just want to get back to the permethrin spray formulations. What I have found is that these aerosol products, and you may have experienced this, I know with the Coleman I have, they don't put enough propellant in all the containers to empty the container, okay? So I like this pump spray by Sawyer quite a bit. Pretty efficient way to apply the product. So if you get the aerosol and people aren't really happy with how it performs, that it just foams out of the actuator or what, you might consider, you know, a different supplier. All right. Protect yourself. Proper tick removal. I get calls from people on this all the time, usually when they have a tick embedded in themselves or attached to their kid. Pointy tweezers, that's what you want to do as a tool. It's not a credit card, it's not a lit match, it's not Vaseline, it's not the dish detergent, it's not peanut butter, you know, I've heard all those, okay? And because the problem with those things are that the tick might detach, but it might take a while. And the longer that tick is attached, increases the risk of transmission of something bad. Now, with the 4 major diseases, Lyme, babesiosis, anaplasmosis, and relapsing fever, there's a 24-hour rule of thumb, okay? But this is biology. It could be, you know, south of that or north of that. But this Powassan virus, transmission rate is 15 minutes, and that makes it kind of a game changer. So we got the proper tool. Everybody should have. Do you guys issue or make available pointy tweezers for tick removal?
No.
Okay, maybe a consideration. I tell people if you do get a tick bite, record the date. Symptoms of Lyme disease might show up in 3 days, might take 30. So if you get a tick bite and know when you were bitten and you're not feeling quite right or having a conversation with your doctor, that's good information to know. I ask people if they save the tick. Invariably, most people do not, okay? What do you think most people do with their ticks? Survey says the flush, #1 answer. But I've also had some people tell me, Larry, I just put it in the microwave oven for a few seconds till I heard it pop. So some people take their own form of revenge on these things. The reason for saving that tick is that, like we do with our research ticks, you can send that tick to the Laboratory of Medical Zoology at UMass Amherst. You would go to tickreport.com. There's an online submission process, and they can do a full panel for all 4 of the major diseases. They can do Powassan. The standard charge for the regular panel is $50, but we have a discount available for Cape residents this year. I'll talk to in a second. If you want to test for Powassan, there's a $99 upcharge. I asked them why 99. They said their marketing advisor said 99 sounds better than 100. I said, okay, I'll give on that one. But it's a great laboratory. I've been working with them for the past 5 years. Fast turnaround, very accurate. Unlike human blood tests for the Lyme, this is 99.9% accurate. If it says it is, it is. If it says it's not, it's not. And once they get the tick, you get your results in about 3 to 5 business days, okay? So we received a grant this year from Cape Cod Healthcare, and like I said before, they like the work we're doing. So instead of $50 for Cape residents this year, it's a $15 copay, okay? Now this grant is due to expire on August 30th. We still have money in our account. And I talked with Cape Cod Healthcare yesterday. They're willing to consider extending that grant into the fall and just burn the money out instead of leaving it on the table. So we're talking with them right now, but they seem very, very receptive to the idea. All right, and here's an example of a tick report. I just pulled this off the database. You can go to the tickreport.com database and search your zip code to see what ticks in your neighborhood were carrying, okay? So they've got like over 16,000 tick tests on file. So this is a tick test from a 3-year-old boy in Norwell, okay? A tick was attached to his head, and the results are pretty interesting. There's another pathogen that's been found in the Midwest, but this kid tested positive for Lyme, Borrelia burgdorferi. He also tested positive for Babesia, okay? So babesiosis is rare in younger people, but let's look at what might be in play. They also take a picture of the tick. This tick is fully engorged. This tick was attached to this kid's head, I don't know how this happens, for at least 4, if not 5 days. So if we use that 24-hour rule of thumb, this kid certainly had a high chance of coming down with Lyme disease, which the doctor should take note. And that's the value of this test. If you're not feeling good, you have this, you can go into your doctor and say, hey, I was exposed to this, but I was also exposed to this, or my kid was exposed to this. So if this kid is showing some other symptoms outside of Lyme, the kid was exposed to a fairly substantial period of time with Babesia. So this co-infection is something we see in the tick populations. We have 5 years of research from on the Cape and the Islands. In these nymph stage ticks, on average, we find 8% of them are co-infected, meaning they're packing Lyme plus one of these other things. There was a tick submission that I did pull off the database. A woman in Eastham submitted a tick last fall, and she tested positive for all 4 major diseases, and the tick was partially engorged. So
That's Joan.
Oh, really?
She works here.
Yeah.
I was trying to keep this confidential.
Oh, sorry, she doesn't, she shares.
That was, I'd almost like to hear her reaction to when she got the results, because when I saw the results, I said, my God. I mean, we've seen 3 out of the 4, but this was the first time we had 4 for 4. So I'm glad you're using a sharing mood. So,
Yeah.
so I think she sold the benefits of the program.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So what we've done is we've simplified the game plan here. You look at a lot of traditional extension programs, they'll recommend like 12 different things for people to do. And in this day and age, if I gave you 12 things to do, you probably wouldn't do any of them. But if I give you 2 or 3 things to do that you can implement today, like you could walk out of here and go to the Agway and buy yourself some permethrin. You could go online, buy insect shield clothing. So you could do this today. So tick checks and use of permethrin treated clothing. You do that alone, you've reduced your chances of getting a tick bite by about 90%, according to Tom Mather at URI. I am a fan of perimeter yard sprays, and for those of you who want to talk about that further, I've got contact information here that, give me a shout and I can walk you through the ins and outs. You can do it yourself or you can hire somebody. And pet protection. So 1, 2, 3. Now what I have is handouts. This is what we call our rack card. Okay, this is the Cliff's Notes version of some of the material I just presented, and it also has my contact information. But I tell people, don't take 1. Take 2, take 3, whatever. If you learn something, give it to some friends. I think that it's tremendously important that if you learn something that you consider important, socialize the message. Okay, that's how word's going to get out. I've also got the tick testing brochures that you can have available. And what I did was, because there's a lot of confusion on this subject, I wrote a guide to how selection of tick repellents, the ones that you put on your skin and clothing. So this kind of details, what's picaridin versus DEET versus permethrin versus oil of lemon eucalyptus. So it's a summary thing that I was asked to put together, and we've gotten some pretty good feedback on this. So that is it. Any follow-up questions that you might have? Yes?
Next door at the fire station, we see people all year long coming with a tick. Some we remove, some we don't, based on how embedded it is. If we remove a tick, is it a good practice to give them that on a piece of tape?
Don't put it on tape.
Okay.
That just makes it more difficult for them. when they receive it at the lab. Best thing to do, if you're going to give them the tip to consider a test, little snack size Ziploc baggie.
Okay. The date.
Yes.
What's the best form of pet protection?
I have some inside information on this. My wife works at Petco up in Plymouth, and I said, hey Ruth, what are people buying? What are vets recommending? And she said, hands down, Canine Advance 2 for dogs is kicking frontline off the shelf. There's a new product that came out a couple of years ago by Bayer. It's a Seresto collar, Seresto with an S.
Yeah.
And you put that on your pet, you get 8 months of continuous flea and tick control. And if you do the math, you might spend $60 on the collar, and if you do the comparison between the monthly topicals, that collar by far and away is a really good value. And I've talked with a lot of people who are using that product, and with the exception of one person, they're all very happy. The one person that wasn't happy is that her dog had a skin reaction to the product, so she stopped using it.
Those are for cats and dogs, too.
Yes, absolutely. And the other thing is, if you have a dog that goes in the water, it cuts that 8 months down to 5 months.
I was just gonna figure out, we've used it the last couple of years, and it's by far better than anything else.
Yeah, I mean,
For the ticks, or does it just repel?
It repels them. I mean, I've seen, like you said, on his pants there, I've seen them on and going down into the fur and then back out.
I had a guy at one meeting asked me if he should put a Seresto collar on each of his ankles.
I thought of that myself. It's like,
Yeah, I said, if people see you wearing ankle bracelets, they might question your moral character.
Just another reason to do it. I was wondering, as far as the solutions for dogs, for cats, what's the best option right now, as far as like a skin treatment or something like that?
Well, you don't use Canine Advance 2. That
Yeah.
contains permethrin,
Yeah.
and permethrin is very toxic to cats.
Okay.
And people, so if you have a dog and a cat in the same house, recommendations are if you treat the dog, keep them separate from each other until the Advance dries down.
All right.
I don't know what's the most effective product for cats because Lyme disease is pretty uncommon in cats.
All right. It
But
was
it's very
more
common in dogs.
more a question of trying to keep, if you got an indoor outdoor cat, keeping the cat from bringing in the ticks to
Mhm.
the house. Now, with that follow-up with the permethrin being toxic to cats, is there a possibility of exposure to a cat if you've got the treated garments in your house?
Once the product is dry, then there's very little transfer of permethrin.
Good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yes, sir.
What do you think about prophylactic treatment as far as like doxycycline or something? If you get a tick bite, some doctors will treat with it. I mean, just based on your tick bite, and some doctors say, no, let's do a test. And how reliable are blood tests?
The blood tests are anything but reliable. You can get false positives, you can get false negatives. So you get a false negative, meaning that, oh, it's negative for Lyme, you could still be sick with Lyme disease. That's a problem. As far as treating people prophylactically with that, I've heard that 2-tablet dose thing over and over. My doctor asked me about that. What do you think about that, Larry? I said, aren't you the MD? You should be telling me. I'm not a doctor, so I can't give you a qualified medical opinion, and the county would appreciate it if Larry Daptis doesn't practice medicine without a license. So I can't go there.
Well, so specifically, my wife had a tick bite. It was in excess of 24 hours, and this was 6 weeks ago. And she was tested, was negative. Didn't get any treatment, any doxycycline, anything like that. Yesterday, she starts having like cold symptoms, flu, achy symptoms. It's been about 6 weeks.
Yeah, you get cold or flu-like symptoms in the middle of the summer. That happened to my wife. Before I came here to Extension, she's an active woman, and we weren't sure what, but she couldn't get out of a chair, and this is July. and we started thinking about Lyme disease, and Beth Israel was kind of going back and forth with her, Nancy, on the Lyme test. She finally went into a walk-in clinic, says, I have Lyme disease, give me antibiotics, and it was like Halloween. It's like, oh yeah, here you go. She got better immediately.
Test the tick?
No, we didn't save it.
But here's a hint. Next Valentine's Day, your wife is going to get a selection of products for protecting her. Show her how much you care. In fact, it's funny, I did a workshop once, and I got a call from a woman. She said, Larry, I just want to tell you, I bought a whole case of permethrin, which is like $120. And I'm thinking about this and thinking, this lady really drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak. And she told me she was 83 years old, and she was going to use it as stocking stuffers for her adult children because she loved them. And I thought that was a really sweet story.
It was she had pierced ears, and it was right on the back of her, where her earring thing is, and she thought it was like a scab.
Sure.
She asked, I feel bad, because she asked me to look at it, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's a scab. The next day, the scab was bigger. I was like, oh crap.
Yes?
On the dog thing, what's the best way of getting I have a husky, it's a double-coated dog, real thick hair, and it's dark. You can't really see the ticks, and it's hard to feel them.
Yep.
What's the best way of getting her clean to put the collar on her, or will the collar just make those fall off as well?
I would ask a vet on that one. I would defer.
Thank you.
We didn't talk much about skin repellents. What's your opinion about that supplemental to the fabric application?
I don't use skin repellents because I find the permethrin is so effective. I do have discussions with people about DEET. They're under the impression that DEET somehow will result in permanent nerve damage or something. The tox profile on DEET is actually quite clean, but there are alternatives. All those products, the keratin, the DEET, the IR35, they're basically all equally effective. And it reminds me one note about the all-naturals that I kind of, if I feel like I have to drill further to make my point, when I looked at those active ingredients that are exempt from EPA registration, what I found is a number of them are actually known human allergens, and there are documented cases of those active ingredients interacting very negatively with sunblocks. So, yes, sir.
So we arrived at work and now we're out with a weed whacker and we're 6 weeks into our last time we sprayed. Can you spray that on your pants at 8:30? How long does it take to dry and go out and work by 9 o'clock?
Depends on ambient humidity. In my experience, it's pretty much dry within an hour. If it's a little damp when you put your clothes on, I don't think there's, because you're not soaking it, saturating it right through, so it's right on the surface.
Does it work if you just spray on, just to have it sprayed on as one more protective coating, or it really has to wash into your pants?
It doesn't wash it. Permethrin is not that water soluble, so it is on the exterior of the garment only. It does not penetrate.
It's a cover, so you can use it, is what you're saying. If you were given the weed whacker and say go out, you can just do a quick spray up to here and walk.
You could. They just recommend you don't be wearing the clothing while you apply it. That's the label, okay? And the label's law.
I got you.
But I'm not EPA, so you use your best judgment.
Thank you.
Is your information available on the county website?
Not yet. We're rebuilding our website, but what type of information would you be looking for specifically?
The information regarding the testing, anything you presented here today?
Well, we've got the tick testing brochures right here. So we're rebuilding the site. Will this presentation be available, or do you want to?
We are actually recording this. It's not live, but we will air this presentation.
It's a good thing I watch my language. All right, anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Larry. Appreciate it.
go back to work, or you can hang out and we can talk about gypsy moths.
What about your black?
We sign in, or are you all set?
All set.
How about your black oak?